Got it. Okay. Heap speaking here. I would officially like to welcome everybody watching to our second day of the Legislative Council. We're really excited to have you here watching. A big shout out to anybody who is watching from Expression Australia. I think this is an event that they have put on for us. And we're really excited to have you come watch our debate today. And we're really excited to display the voices of young people across, across Victoria, and also a very, very good section of the community as well. My name is Heap, and I look after the training aspects of the program, the Youth Parliament program, and I'm really, really excited to once again have a Deaf Vic team with us this year. I'd like to introduce our esteemed chair, our president for the debate, a really good friend of mine who has been on the Deafhood teams of 2017, 2018, and was a task force member in 2019 and 2020, also the youth governor of 2020 as well. And I can probably let him introduce himself better than I can, but I'd love to introduce to everybody our president, Nicholas Steer.
Thank you so much, Heap, for that warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here this morning. To be honest with you, I think it's phenomenal to see so many people in the chamber today, online, streaming in public. I think it's absolutely awesome, and a very good shout out to the team for making this possible and all the hard work in the scenes in the background. So my name is Nicholas Steer, and this is my sign name. I am a deaf person, and I have been involved in the Deafhood team many years ago. And it's really good to see the new breed of the Deafhood team members here today from our deaf community in Youth Parliament. And I think it's a really exciting time to see a significant impact, positive impact for all of those members involved in the community and in the public. Hold on a minute, my cat has just hopped on my desk. Okay, the cat was just slightly rude, but sorry about that. So I just really want to say that this is fantastic because this week is the National Week of Deaf People. And I think it's apt that we have a bill today that reflects what's happening this week. The National Week of Deaf People is the whole week of celebrations, activities, reflections in regards to deaf people and their immense advocacy and lobbying to enhance the lives of deaf people. And I think it's really exciting to see Deaf Victoria team here today debating their bill in regards to Auslan as a LOTE subject in Victorian schools. So I think that's enough about me, and I think we all are ready to see the debate. So I think we'll get the show underway. Now, I call upon the sponsor of the bill,
President, the Honourable Member, Halliday Christoffel, I move to introduce a bill titled Implementing and Mentoring Words Auslan Subject in Victorian School Bill 2021.
Now, the question is that the bill now be read for the first time. All those in the opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Honourable Member.
President, the Honourable Member, Hannah Christoffel, I move that the bill now be read a second time. I would like to run everybody through the reasons why a compulsory Auslan life should be implemented in Victorian schools. But first, a bit about the bill. A bill will establish a life Auslan co-design with the deaf community to be delivered at all Victorian schools from donation to UCAN, so that all government, public and private schools. The reason why we decide not to include year 11 and 12 is because we know VCE students have more subjects to cover. However, these students can choose to do VCE outside of school if they wish. The curriculum for most subjects will be co-designed with a member of the deaf community and hard of hearing community, as they are the constants of the language and the culture. It's vital to learn the language for members of the deaf community. They are the ones who hold that information, as they can teach it more accurately. And it's not just about the language, but also the culture and the community. This bill will also provide deaf awareness training for teachers and provide Auslan course at a lower cost. So we have teachers qualified to deliver this course. Some benefits of this bill include making life, work, and family more accessible and inclusive for deaf people. It will help to make Victoria a more equal place for everyone. There are times where I use Auslan at school, and people might stare or comment on how rare it is. I find that interesting because here people don't know where to learn Auslan, and oftentimes I don't ask their people to do it directly. There are many barriers for deaf people today, from Zoom to mask wearing and media like movies, like auto captions on YouTube. This bill can help remove this barrier. The bill may not be perfect, it might not solve all barriers faced by deaf people, but I believe it is a step in the right direction. If the bill was too hard, it might lead to other changes to make Victoria more inclusive over time. Over time, more people know in Auslan. Some do. Improve employment for deaf people, makes things easier in the home so families can have good times, and improve mental health of deaf people and make healthcare more accessible, because deaf people have 4 times of getting mental health. And say if you're a deaf baby, just born a fresh baby, and you go to doctors to their hearing test, and as a parent, you might be shocked to hear that doctor give your baby back, say your baby failed test on hearing test. Imagine your baby that failed its first test a few weeks old. If this happened in 8 degrees or in Sparta, they'll throw the baby or put the baby in the forest or the river, hoping that they come back stronger, which they often don't or never. This is Shire 2021. We should not be doing that. We should treat the baby with love and respect so that he grow up properly. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Now I move speaker, the honourable member from the other team. And I'd like to invite Honourable Member Gray.
President, the Honourable Member Gray. Whilst the government believe that this bill is well intended and we agree wholeheartedly with the premise of the bill, there are a few crucial points that need to be addressed before we feel comfortable to sponsor this bill. Throughout this debate, you will hear several points from members of the government discussing some of the issues that are apparent upon reading the bill, such as the practicality of the enactment of the bill, the negative effects on students with other differentiated learning needs, the impacts on already struggling schools and staff due to specific and challenging circumstances, queries about the funding of the implementation and sustainability of this bill, and the potential job loss this bill may cause. However, for the moment, I have some points of my own that I would like to raise. Firstly, the time of the commencement of this bill is unrealistic as the opposition wish to implement the bill as soon as it receives assent. A bill this complex will require a very minimum of at least 1 year to be implemented effectively due to the complexity and sheer amount of time that it will take to construct a program that can be seamlessly implemented into the professional development of teaching staff and for a course to be created that is effective for a wide variety of participants in this program, as it will need to be accessible as both a digital and online program for those that may live in rural and remote areas, and especially due to the current COVID-19 pandemic. This is particularly relevant to Clause 7, as there are presently no TAFE courses that teach or facilitate the teaching of Auslan. There are also needs to be an adequate amount of time to train teachers to be at least partially fluent in Auslan, as it is highly important to learn from someone that understands and appreciates the intricacies of this phenomenal language. So it is not going to be a bill that will be enabled to smoothly integrate itself instantly after receiving assent from the Youth Governor of Victoria. Secondly, the cost of implementation of deaf awareness training for teachers, as mentioned in Clause 8, will require a mammoth amount of funding to get this training off the ground and then sustained for a decent period of time. Additionally, deaf awareness training will be incredibly costly for schools for all registered teaching staff to partake in a refresher course every 6 months, as mandated by Clause 8.2. The 6-month DAT refresher course seems rather excessive when, in comparison, mandatory modules such as mandatory reporting are only required to be refreshed every 12 months for school staff. Clause 6.1 states that there shall be a minimum requirement of 100 minutes per week dedicated to the LOTE Auslan subject. However, 100 minutes is not equivalent to regular class time. Secondary school students have 3 to 6 classes a day, ranging from 40 to 90 minutes each day. It is nearly impossible to implement a 100-minute week unless the opposition intends to change class times in schools all around Victoria. Finally, the opposition has not discussed whether or not the mandatory study of Auslan for students from the Youth Foundation to 10 will run in conjunction with the already compulsory language programs that students from Foundation to 10 are partaking in. Are we expecting students in Year 8 to abandon the language that they are already learning and have been learning for years, and then expecting them to immediately begin studying Auslan? Or are we expecting these students to try and study 2 languages at once? Will there be a transition period to enable a smooth change from language to language? The opposition needs to make their intention with this issue transparent before we expect the students of Victoria, who are already facing a difficult time due to the current COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused lengthy absences from regular on-site learning, to face further possible disruption and obstacles within their learning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member Cruz. President, Honourable Member Cruz. Auslan LOTE will absolutely benefit all of the community, both deaf and hearing. And these are some of the reasons why. Firstly, it will make communication a lot easier between deaf and hearing people. Learning Auslan means you can interact with so many different people and you have communications with them. In regards to travel and communicating with people from different cultures, knowing sign language and being able to communicate with gestures is a huge benefit. This means that you can better communicate with people. In general, even if you don't share the same spoken language, this will be of benefit. My second point is how important it is to make sure that the children with a disability have access to Auslan as a language. Many children on the autism spectrum use sign language to communicate. Having teachers and students learning to communicate with a visual language, our bill could make Victoria more accessible for many children experiencing auditory barriers. Now, having Auslan as a compulsory subject will help remove so many communication barriers in the workplace, schools, everyday interactions, and family. My final point is that this bill will make Victoria a leader in supporting the deaf community. Other deaf people across the globe who want to visit Victoria and be able to communicate will be included more. By making Victoria more inclusive and aware of the deaf community and culture, the bill will significantly reduce mental health and adversity for deaf people and improve their experience in our society. So I think it's vital that we support the deaf people globally, especially if you've got visitors coming into the country. There's more access and more inclusion for deaf people. Making all of Victoria aware and reducing all the mental health issues for deaf and hard of hearing people. I think it's very vital to make sure that the access is there in our society. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call on Honourable Member Walsh.
President, the Honourable Member Walsh. In Victoria, according to the 2016 census, only 2,800 people spoke Auslan out of 6.6 million people in Victoria. That's not very many people when you consider almost 20 times that many people can speak Mandarin as their main language, and 10 times more people speak Greek, Italian, and Vietnamese as their main language. And I also must ask, how many of you remember how to even count past 10 in your mandatory LOTE subject from school? My guess wouldn't be many. Therefore, as important as it is to be able to communicate easily with people that only speak Auslan and for them to be able to communicate back, it is important to ask a question when putting forward this bill is, would the resources that are being put in place to put this bill to work, could they be used to benefit something else in another area of learning? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call on Honourable Member Dennis. President, Honourable Member Dennis. It is the opposition's view that all schools should have LOTE as a subject in Victoria. One of the main drivers for this is that there are benefits for the community outside of just outside of the classroom. You will also learn as part of the subject about the culture and the community. You'll learn about, the subject will cover communication with deaf people. Communication is vital for deaf students. There are misconceptions about deaf people, but we are just as smart and intelligent and funny as everyone else. The mainstream community are not aware of the deaf community, but we are members of the global community, just like everyone else. Often people are under the misconception that we communicate using American Sign Language because that is what they have exposure to in media. But we here in Australia have Auslan as our own unique, beautiful language. The majority of deaf children are born into families who may have never met a deaf person before. Often, when they meet their deaf child, they are experiencing access to something that they've never experienced before. They're not aware of the culture and the community that their deaf child has been born into as a birthright. They usually speak to medical professionals rather than members from the deaf community about how to raise their child. Those medical professionals are also often inexperienced or unaware of this community and offer medical interventions rather than access to language. With this bill being implemented over time, medical professionals and parents, members of the general community will have information and knowledge about the language and the communication needs of deaf children. And so these situations will be phased out. Auslan LOTE in schools will be of great benefit to everyone in the community, not just deaf people. Deaf children have to rely on heavy and high language needs with English that sometimes are barriers because there will be ease of communication throughout the whole community. Deaf people also are not just found in schools. We live our lives in the same way that everyone else does. The deaf awareness training portion of this bill is has major outcomes for the wider community, not just through the classrooms. We go to education, and we have other parts of our life. This will allow us for the community to be aware of how to communicate with us throughout our life, and therefore making the community more accessible. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call on Honourable Member Fitzsimmons.
I would first like to highlight some of the things that the opposition has said. Speaker 1 said that by learning Auslan, we'll be able to communicate when we travel with other people from other countries. However, it should be noted that sign language is highly nuanced and it differs from different countries. And although Auslan is derived from BSL and you may be able to communicate with people from Britain, otherwise there is no real benefit from travelling and learning Auslan. I would also like to point out that this bill should not be passed, as mandating Auslan as a subject has the potential to negatively impact the quality of education that students will receive in Victorian schools. The most recent UNICEF report card ranked Australia a deplorable 39 out of 41 high and middle income countries in terms of quality education. Our main concern should be raising our national education standards. Currently, students with extra or different needs face significant barriers and difficulties to access equal education, but many of these barriers would be resolved if appropriate funding were available. Surely we should be concentrating funds here instead of financing another subject. And what about students who are visually impaired? Will they be expected to learn Auslan? Additionally, many Victorian schools do not even teach researched and evidence-based English and literacy programs. This begs the question, how can we expect students to learn another language when they aren't even being correctly taught the language that they mainly speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Next, I call on Honourable Member Beard.
President, the Honourable Member Beard. So just getting up my speech. When deaf babies are tested for their hearing, they are said to have failed. Parents are apologised to and shown pity, and then their children are overly protected and disconnected from their community as a result. This bill would allow future generations of deaf children to be supported in connecting to their culture and community, and in turn show hearing parents deafness is not a loss. Additionally, students of this subject would be able to communicate with deaf and hard of hearing friends and family, reducing communication barriers and cultural divides. This reduction of communication barriers also applies to other culturally and linguistically diverse communities, as it can act as a franca lingua, a language to unite people with different native languages. On a similar point, for people who struggle with the use of spoken languages for reasons outside of hearing loss, it gives another avenue of communication that may not have been offered otherwise. Members of my own family have been non-verbal or semi-verbal, or have been non-verbal or semi-verbal, and the ability to use and the normalization of Auslan is a key part of opening communication channels with a large variety of communities. The opportunity to communicate is more than speech. It is friendship, self-advocacy, and so much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I next call on Honourable Member Bethune.
President, Honourable Member Bethune. The majority of regional and rural remote schools grapple with facilitating a LOTE subject currently at school, let alone without changing the language of what they are teaching completely. In order for Auslan to be implemented into schools, staff have to be taught the language first. This will cause complications. Staff are unlikely to be confident with teaching a new language. With few teachers having the required credentials to teach this subject in the early stages of implementation, it will put a further strain on schools that are already struggling to adequately facilitate a LOTE subject. Availability of language teachers in rural, remote, and regional locations is already incredibly scarce. The implementation of this bill will cause great stress to teachers. Sorry, I lost my spot. As a lot of teachers in this area are already studying on top of their teaching load, with many teachers in smaller areas teaching subjects outside of their specializations. This will take a long time to be implemented correctly to show results and to make the teaching of the subject fair to students and teachers in rural, remote, and regional areas.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call on Honourable Member Beard.
President, the Honourable Member Beard. I rise in the House today to speak on the matter of making Auslan a mandatory LOTE in the Victorian schooling system. We firmly believe that offering Auslan to students in schools across Victoria will have an abundance of benefits for many living in our state. This proposed legislation offers Auslan courses at a lower cost to both provide necessary teachers to support the LOTE classes and also provide further and stronger opportunities for those who are interested to learn sign language. This forges better relationships between all members of our community. These opportunities will not only benefit students, but professionals also, as the bill will also create more jobs for those able to deliver Auslan as a LOTE subject. It will also enhance the broader teaching community within Victoria, making classrooms safer for deaf students. It will teach them how to interact with deaf people, including ways to communicate without fully knowing Auslan, but some basic signs, which will therefore help to solve common myths about deaf culture and community. We, as the opposition, urge you to vote in favour of the bill, a bill which will mean so much to an entire community. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call on Honourable Member Fenton.
Thank you, President. The Honourable Member Fenton. Whilst the government completely agree that this is a terrific idea and an increased appreciation and understanding of Auslan will create a better Victoria, this bill is not the right way to go about it. Firstly, the opposition has put no mention as to where they plan to get the money for this bill from, and have completely overlooked the fact that for this bill to be funded, they will either be taking away funding from another important subject, which in turn will create a society of people who are less skilled in other areas, or put an even bigger stress on the state government or the individual schools. This bill will be very expensive to implement, and we'll need to ensure that the appropriate measures are taken to guarantee that this bill does not create a bigger divide between publicly and privately funded schools. The word mandatory is coercive and does not leave any room for schools which do not have the same financial backing as that of a private school, which will only help facilitate a bigger divide. Further, the lack of transparency about where the funding will come from, coupled with the unrealistically short implementation time which the Honourable Member Gray discussed, is certain to push the already overworked education system. Finally, I'd like to question how the opposition hopes to monitor the success and benefits of this bill, and urge them to rewrite this bill with another clause which identifies the ways which the state will monitor the programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call on Honourable Member Dean.
President, the Honourable Member Din speaking. Okay, this week is coincidentally the National Week of Deaf People. This is the perfect moment to make a change within our society and shed more light on the awareness of this community. The deaf community can be seen as another world, another perspective that those who are not hard of hearing will never be able to understand and experience. I will never be able to experience. Celebrations like National Week of Deaf People, Auslan Day, and International Day of Sign Languages, as well as so many others, allow us the privilege to be a part of this community. We are being given the chance to be educated. The quantity of effort and development of Auslan is incredible. Over years, it has adapted and changed. I will not allow it to go unrecognized. This revised LOTE Auslan curriculum shall acknowledge and include the celebrations as mentioned, as well as other changes being made, results in the curriculum being reviewed annually by those in the deaf and hard of hearing community. This means the curriculum will constantly be updated to correspond to the fast development of Auslan. I urge that we do not overlook this issue and that we enable a brighter path for the deaf and hard of hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now call on Honourable Member Killen.
President, the Honourable Member Killen. While the intentions behind the proponents of this bill are admirable, and the government is more than willing to get behind the cause, I cannot help but be concerned about the lack of oversight for the teachers of our state in many different situations. For rural areas where schools already struggle to implement even one LOTE subject, the costs of implementing a deaf awareness training refresher course for all teachers every 6 months is highly unrealistic. These teachers are simultaneously some of the most hardworking yet undervalued members of our communities, with many of them giving up their break time and holidays to tutor students, grade practice papers, and otherwise try and bridge the enormous disparity in education that exists for different areas of Victoria. To foist additional burdens upon these teachers is not only impractical and difficult for many small schools to afford, but also pushes an already overworked group further past the brink. Additionally, this bill mentions nothing in regards to substitute teachers, teacher aides, trainees, and part-time employees, which would place even more financial burdens upon schools if implemented, while leaving a critical gap in deaf awareness if it's not addressed. It's not an exaggeration to say that while this may even lead to job loss for teachers, especially if schools can't afford to implement more than one LOTE subject, as previous members have mentioned, French, Japanese, Spanish teachers, and many more may all find themselves without work because of the need to implement Auslan as a mandatory LOTE subject. The implications of this run further when considered in relation to VC students who are already expected to keep up with some of the harshest workloads in the schooling system, with those who need prerequisites for difficult tertiary courses such as medicine being further restricted in their options. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Would anyone else like to say anything from the opposition? Okay, you can put your hand up if you want to say anything. Just looking at my screen. Honourable Member Christophe. Chesler, my apologies.
President, the Honourable Member Chesler. So several speakers have raised doubts about whether we have enough teachers trained in Auslan to support this bill. And they've also raised doubts about whether we have enough students who would be interested in learning Auslan to support this bill. So I just want to address these claims. Firstly, assuming that the figure of that 2,800 Auslan speakers in Victoria is correct, this is not an indicator of a lack of interest or usefulness. Rather, it is a reflection of a lack of opportunity to learn Auslan and implement and practice it within the community and with deaf and hard of hearing Auslan speakers. Furthermore, this bill has measures to ensure that a greater number of teachers can learn and teach Auslan through over time through the implementation of free TAFE courses for teachers learning Auslan. One final claim I would like to address is that this may lead to job losses for other LOTE subjects such as French or Spanish. And while I'm unsure about the economic consequences of it, I think it does raise an important question of whether we value teaching French, Spanish, Mandarin more than teaching and a first language that is essential to many Australians, Auslan. Do we value subjects that may not be useful in real life more than Auslan? I think it's important that speakers keep in mind whether the status quo with reference to LOTE subjects is one we would like to uphold over those of Auslan. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Anyone else would like to speak on the government side? We still have a few minutes left for the debate. If you want an opportunity to stand up and say anything, just let me know. You can click on the reactions with your hand raised to let me know if you want to say anything. Honourable Member Grave.
President, the Honourable Member Grave, I would like to point out the sustainability of this bill. There has been obvious consideration into making sure this program is long-lasting, with the annual reviews being made and also the 6-month refresher courses. This means that people will feel supported to enact this program, and it is going to be quite successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Now, anyone from the government? Would anybody like to speak on behalf of the government? If there isn't anyone, I'd like to call on the sponsor of the bill for their right of reply. Oh, we have a raised hand from the government. Honourable Member Butler.
Thank you, President. Honourable Member Butler. I would just like to address that the opposition has not mentioned any penalties regarding their bill, therefore can't outline consequences for if schools do not participate in this training, and therefore how can we make sure that it is properly mandated across all schools? Thank you.
Okay, just on that, I would call upon the sponsor of the bill for their right of reply. Honourable Member Halliday Christophe.
Honourable Member, that viewpoint we made with this bill be passed. One, something might say this, I say it's very important. It's some of deaf people first language too. It can help break down barriers between deaf and hearing people, interpretation, it's bring more awareness of deaf people and culture. Also, it can increase hearing people's understanding of the world in terms of Auslan or culture. So people can have general understanding of how deaf people works in the world. Deaf people are a part of Shire, but not everyone know or learn Auslan because, like someone said on the number 9 team, that's very low people use Auslan. This is a good thing. They also create more equality for deaf citizens. And I want to add some that someone said that about 100 minutes is not enough. At our school, it's 2 periods. It's 50 minutes for one period, another 50 minutes for one period. And if different school had different times, then 2 periods per week, it's good. That is what I meant. And this week is National Week of Deaf People. Our themes in celebrating thriving deaf communities. Thursday is International Day of Sign Languages. And themes for that would sign for human rights. A challenge a government to learn at least one or two signs by Thursday and allow us to be equal. Here is the first side I would like to offer. It is that. Thank you. And no politics.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Now, the question is that the title of the bill so compulsory LOTE has Auslan as a subject in Victorian schools bill for 2021. Now be read for the second and third time. All those in the opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. Well, I think the ayes have it. Well done. Congratulations, Deaf Victoria team. I think that's it for now. Is that right? That's the end of this debate. Keith, how was that?
Keith speaking.
It was phenomenal.
it was absolutely phenomenal. Thank you once again, Nick. I was honestly a little bit emotional throughout. Not gonna lie, there were a couple of speeches where I was like, wow, like I've been on this program for quite a number of years as a task force member, and I remember back to when Nick was first on the program, and it was my first year on task force, and Nick and his partner, or well, fiance Livy, taught me quite a lot about deaf and hard of hearing people, and for that I'm really grateful, and taught me Auslan, well, the limited Auslan that I know. I still can only sign very slowly and can only finger spell, but I'm learning more and more signs every single day, and I'm grateful to you, Nick, Livy, and the first Deafwood team for paving the pathway for the Deaf Vic team for this year. We're really excited, and once again, congratulations to the Deaf Vic team. We're really excited, and I can I guess speak on behalf of everybody here in saying that I think it was a really respectful debate, a really high quality debate, and it was really an eye opener for someone like me who is a hearing person. So I think that in spirit of National Week of Deaf Peoples, I think I thank Nick, I thank Livy, who is your fiance, Nick, and Kate, and all the other Deafwood participants from 2017 to now, for engaging in our program, for teaching us, and for making sure that we are wary of all people, and I thank you for that. I think now we go into our chat. We can turn off the live stream now. Thank you.